That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Being the Ricardos, the third film directed by Aaron Sorkin, which Amazon Picture Studios is releasing on December 10th, 2021.
What are Aaron's two other films?
Well, Aaron Sorkin is a very notable screenwriter. Back in the 90s, of course, he wrote A Few Good Men, Malice, which also starred Nicole Kidman, and in television, The West Wing, and The Newsroom, Social Network, lots of stuff. He has directed Molly's Game in 2017 with Jessica Chastain, and then you saw the last film he directed, The Trial of the Chicago 7, last year.
Okay. The basic story revolves around Lucille Ball in the early 50s.
1953.
It's set like in 1 week, basically, right after she has been, I guess, deposed by some sort of Senate committee regarding her potential involvement with the Communist Party.
Not just any Senate committee, it's HUAC, it's the House of Un-American Activities Committee, which is a very notable committee, yeah.
Sure. So it's been found that she did not have a connection to the Communist Party, so she's been cleared. However, there's a popular radio host,
Walter Winchell,
who calls her a communist. So her team, the executives, her husband, Desi Arnaz, everyone's very worried about the backlash.
CBS, yes.
So it's the week where they're expecting the fallout. So there's that, plus Lucy finds out she's pregnant and is ready to tell the executives, not only is she pregnant, but she plans on having her pregnancy worked into the show I Love Lucy. And back then it was considered vulgar for a woman to be pregnant on TV.
Because it meant that they had sex.
And if we all remember, on the show, Lucy and Ricky slept in separate beds, so them getting pregnant, or her being pregnant, was not an option. So there's that, in addition to some infidelity issues with Desi.
Yes, because at the same time, some rag is publishing photos of him gallivanting around Hollywood with the ingenue.
So the opening of the film is it takes a while for us to actually see Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball. So the opening is sort of Desi coming home to Lucy, and we only see their bodies, not their faces. And Lucy's holding a newspaper article showing Desi with another woman. And they're sort of arguing when Desi reminds her, that picture is old. And you were there with me, bitch. You were there when I was with this lady. So calm down. There's nothing, no funny business. Then we basically move forward with what I just said. And it ends with, so it's Monday through Friday. So on Friday, the taping of the show, Desi's idea is to, because he would usually warm up the audience before the live taping. His idea is to tell the audience what's happening and that there may be some news article saying Lucy is a communist, but she's not. And the gag is he gets on the phone, puts it up to the microphone with J. Edgar Hoover, who basically confirms to the audience Lucy's not a communist. So they're banking on the audience's reaction. So if the audience boos her, it's donezo. But if they applaud her, then she'll be fine. Of course they applaud. Of course we know Lucille Ball went on to be a comedic legend. But there's also a title credit or whatever that explains that
in 1960,
several years later, she files for divorce from Desi. The end.
Yes. There's also a device. It actually opens upon this device we return to of the executive producer of I Love Lucy and two of the staff writers as older individuals, some probably 40 years later.
Documentary style.
Yes, they're being interviewed about this particular
in current
week.
time about that week, yeah.
Yes, and then riffing off of what they're saying, the film presents flashback sequences where Desi and Lucille meet for the first time in their progressive careers.
I don't have many notes. I think this was a well-done movie. Don't remember. I didn't know who Aaron Sorkin was before you reminded me, but you explained that he has a style of writing that's very slick. And that was my first thought after I finished the film, was the dialogue felt very slick.
Yeah, kind of staccato almost.
But it's well done. I think if a person doesn't know who Lucille Ball is or isn't familiar with the political climate in the early 50s and why her being aligned with the Communist Party would be such a big deal, then I think the film would come across as very matter of fact. Like, there's this lady who's an actor. It's very dramatic. There is zero comedy to this movie. We don't see Lucille Ball the way most of us know her from the show I Love Lucy. She's very serious.
Yeah, well, because Nicole Kidman's not really doing a Lucille Ball impression.
No. Well, we should talk about that separately.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that it's a well done dramatic piece about a week in the life of this actor and couple. So that's that. Getting to Nicole Kidman, because I know, like, Deborah Messing, like, there was something, I don't really know, but I know there was something about her campaigning for this role and kind of being salty she didn't get it. And after seeing the film, I feel like she wouldn't have probably been right for this because it's not comedic.
Well, it's not about Lucy Ricardo. It is about this woman,
right.
Lucille Ball. And I think what's important with the flashbacks establishing that this woman had a career well in advance of I Love Lucy, and how she believed she was kind of at the end of her tether as a contract player at RKO. And wasn't even originally the redhead that we know her as.
Well, Lucille Ball is not a natural redhead.
Yes. Yeah. But so yeah, the whole Deborah Messing thing I think is whatever. I think Nicole Kidman does a really good job of allowing us to be transported into what is this story about a woman in Hollywood.
Also, not to be shady, but I'm always shady. I feel like Lucille Ball was a beautiful woman. Mm-hmm. Much more beautiful than Deborah Messing. So I feel like Nicole Kidman, so the film is in color, but when anytime we see footage of I Love Lucy, it's in black and white. And I think it's in black and white that Nicole Kidman really favors Lucy Ricardo because she has her hair up and the curly updo. In color, you know, I mean, Nicole's face it looks like she got the RuPaul treatment, like she snatched back and maybe they did some de-aging on her. Her body looks amazing from what we see on the screen.
Yeah, but that doesn't bother me because they also take pains to showcase the different makeup of the period across the 30s or the 40s and 50s.
You kept saying that, and I don't disagree, except that my first note was that I had a hard time recognizing, like, periods, because we do jump back and forth, like, I mean, there's like a 20-year period of jumping back to when they first began and when her career first began to the present, like early 50s. And besides her eyebrow game being different and her hair being different, I mean, I got lost sometimes on which era we were in, because trying to de-age Javier Bardem is not as successful.
I agree with that. I didn't really have trouble following that, but I also feel like I'm really probably more in tune to kind of what they were saying.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I had no trouble following that whatsoever. And I took some of her dialogue telling Desi to keep up was almost kind of like telling the audience the same thing. I think Aaron Sorkin is a gifted, dare I say, brilliant writer. It does often feel a bit too slick, but at the same time, I thought it's a really nice examination of a couple their work at first pulled them apart and how that kind of brought them closer together, and then how she was able to leverage her power to create this platform for Desi Arnaz, and working together eventually, of course, drove them apart as well.
Sure, I think it's effective. I don't know that it's genius in this instance. I think it also does a good job of showing Desi's abilities.
Yes.
So
I thought that the two of them, Bardem and Nicole Kidman, had a nice chemistry. There's flashes of the dialogue that I think worked so well. I like how they call this a compound fracture of a week, with just having to live through something like that with all those things going on. Because at the same time, we have this taping of the show, and Vivian, Vance, and William Frawley, played by Nina Arianda and J.K. Simmons, who kind of have this love-hate relationship.
Fred and Ethel
Of the TV series I Love Lucy, and about how Vivian, of course, at this time is trying to lose weight and be thinner. She wants Ethel to be pretty. And about, just about women aging in Hollywood. I think there are a lot of compelling moments between them.
I think this was a smart approach to doing a film about Lucille Ball, like taking a specific period in her life and sort of examining that. So it works well. One thing that didn't work for me is there's a lot of time spent focusing on Lucille Ball's, comedic process. And there is a lot of time spent, particularly the episode that's being filmed during this week, where there's a dinner scene that involves Ethel and Fred. Like it's the episode where like they sort of like separated, and then Lucy and Ricky bring them back with like this dinner moment. And a lot of time is spent with Lucille thinking about it and her executing the staging and the direction.
Fussing over it, yeah.
And if a person doesn't know who Lucille Ball is, I think, if you think she's a comedic genius, then it is what it is. I think that she's good at physical comedy. I do enjoy I Love Lucy, but I think we don't really see like what's so funny about her. So all this time spent with her attempting to execute this scene, we don't really see the end result and why it was so genius. So I think it almost makes her seem kind of like neurotic and like obsessive.
But see, I think that
than like a comedic genius.
But this isn't any just normal week behind the show, and I think that was showing that she was trying very hard to compartmentalize what was going on by drilling down into this and only this as a way to vent all her frustrations, because she just didn't have time to deal with it all.
Sure, I don't know that the film is trying to show her as a comedic genius. It really is just spending time on this week she's having and all the interplays. What I'm saying is that if a person doesn't know who Lucille Ball is or is not familiar with her work, you would leave this film not really understanding the impact her process had on like sitcom comedies or, that's what a sitcom is, a situation comedy. But anyway, yeah, I feel like you would leave not understanding her impact.
Sure. I can agree with that sentiment about this film in particular. But at the same time, they do drill down into her fussiness about this particular staging per se, but what I did really enjoy is there are lighter moments where they're envisioning future episodes, and I liked they show her kind of thinking through a scene and talking. It's about the creative process and how you don't see what the comedic genius is there, but what goes behind making this, which is how it feels and looks and sounds, which I really liked. There is some comedy because there's some bitchiness between the writers. Madelyn, Pugh, played by Alia Shawkat and Linda Lavin, and Jake Lacy and Ronnie Cox play Bob Carroll, and about how they're at odds with one another. There's really only a couple laughs about things they say.
Another thing that didn't quite connect with me is I don't know if we were supposed to understand that Lucy believed Desi was not cheating on her. Because when we flash back to her younger, when she first meets Desi, she seems very savvy, like very hip to the game, which made me think that there's no doubt this woman understood that Desi was cheating on her. But she kind of just let it play because it's like their life is so involved in this business and this show. But then there's a point where it seems like maybe she doesn't believe that.
I think it's at the point where all the talk about her, Lucille Ball, wanting a home, and about how he wasn't coming home anymore because they spent all day working together. And I think to me, that was my understanding, the interpretation this film is doing of what was probably too much for her, is that they had a very physical, passionate relationship that perhaps during those stages she was able to look past infidelity, but when he was no longer there, that's when it stopped for her. Yeah, that's what I took from it.
I feel like, if the story is about three things, her relationship with him, her pregnancy, and her being a communist, I feel like her relationship with Desi needed more. Like, that feels wanting.
I think if you like old Hollywood history, there's a lot of fun bits, especially they go into how what was supposed to be a big break for her was this film starring Henry Fonda called The Big Street, which I went back and watched after this because I'd never seen it. And I don't think that's a very good film, and it's really not even a very good role for her. In fact, it's more fun to see her in old film noirs like Henry Hathaway's The Dark Corner or Douglas Sirk's Lured. But just kind of how she was at the precipice, as the Madelyn Pugh character says, could have been the next Bette Davis or Joan Crawford or Judy Holliday, who, according to this script, it seems Lucille Ball had bitter resentment for. But I enjoyed all of that.
What would you give it?
I'd give it 3.5 out of 5.
I would give it 3.5 out of 5 as well. Anything else?
No.
Bye.